Welcome to the Dynamic Leaders Podcast, a product of Talent 409. I am your host, Colin Cernelia. Thank you for joining us today. Go to talent409.com to learn more about how we can help your team or organization with their leadership and culture development. This podcast is available on Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play, Radio.com, iTunes, and Apple Podcasts. Please consider taking a minute and on Apple Podcasts, giving us a 5-star rating and review. Doing this helps other dynamic leaders find us, and it helps us find other dynamic leaders. And don't forget, you can now ask Alexa to play your favorite Apple Podcasts on any Amazon-enabled device. Just say, Alexa, play the Dynamic Leaders Podcast.
Getting Dynamic Leaders with Colin Cernelia from Apple Podcasts.
On to my featured conversation today with the amazing Katie Williams. Katie is the co-founder of Team Lacrosse, which is a company that helps women of all ages develop and find opportunities in the lacrosse world. Katie is also a former Division I lacrosse player herself. Since finishing up her lacrosse career, she has lived all over the country. She has continued to coach and be a part of the game, and she offers some really great knowledge and insight, not only into the game of lacrosse, but into all the curveballs that life can offer you. I'm really excited to bring this conversation to you, so let's get ready to discover our talent altitude, and here is my conversation with Katie Williams. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Dynamic Leaders Podcast. Today, my guest on the line is Katie Williams. Katie, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
I'm glad to hear that you're excited, and we have a ton to talk about today throughout the course of our conversation. So let's dive right into things. And first, as I do with all of my guests, I want to give you an opportunity to tell the listening audience a little bit about yourself. So please tell us, who are you?
Hi, everyone. Well, Katie Williams here. I am currently the assistant women's lacrosse coach at Montclair State University. I am also one of the co-founders of Team Lacrosse Academy, which is a all-girls lacrosse club that runs out of North Carolina. My role there now is primarily helping focus on our recruiting efforts and building our programs in a way to help our kids get recruited and see the value in, what they're doing, playing club sports, and also just advising and really adding in that mentorship component to all of our programs and helping young women develop and see the value in playing team sports.
Awesome. So lacrosse, obviously your bread and butter, and obviously you got to play at the Division I level, played competitively through college, and now are still involved in the sport through your own company and also as an assistant coach, as you mentioned. Let's backtrack all the way to the beginning and let's talk about how lacrosse came about. Was that always your sport of choice? Did you play multiple sports growing up?
So I played every sport, did every athletic possible thing you can think of. My parents were really, really big on me being well-rounded and trying new things and following through on commitments. I tried a lot of things that I didn't like, but my parents, made me finish out the season or whatever it was, just to kind of learn the value in working with different types of people, having to do things that you might not always be the best at or enjoy. So I really did it all. But as I got into middle school and high school, I was a tri-varsity athlete for 5 years. I played field hockey, basketball, and lacrosse. And honestly, basketball was my main sport for a really long time. And then as I got into high school, I never really hit my growth spurt. I'm a massive 5'2". So not that height is everything, but obviously it's a pretty important piece in basketball. And I really just started to fall in love with the game of lacrosse. My size it was really the first sport that I had played that my size wasn't such a huge factor and where I could actually use it to my advantage. And that's honestly where all my friends were and like what the team that they were all on. And I loved all of my lacrosse coaches. So I just kind of started to gravitate towards it. And then one of my friends actually got an invitation to try out for the Virginia national team as a junior, and I did as well. I wasn't going to do it, but she talked me into going to the tryout with her because she wanted to know someone and go with someone. So I ended up going, and I ended up making the team, which was really, really exciting. And I think from there, that kind of catapulted me into, wow, I could actually do this and, get college paid for. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I got into it.
So you had that moment where that switch went off, where you said, hey, this is something I can do at the next level. And I think we all get to that point one way or another. So that's really interesting that for you, it was a moment where maybe necessarily you didn't want to go to this event, and then you did, you end up making the team, and all things, history's written the way it is now. But so can you tell us, just dive a little bit deeper into, so you decide that maybe internally you say, hey, I think I can do this at the next level. What happens after that? Are you starting to reach out to schools, or schools starting to reach out to you? How do you get recruited?
So I really didn't know anything about the recruiting process when I was at that stage. And I think the landscape of recruiting has changed drastically since then. As a college coach and working in recruiting, now that I'm on this side of it and I see how it is now, it's a wonder that I actually got recruited, because I wasn't really reaching out to coaches. I thought, you made these teams, you went to tournaments, and you got seen by coaches or you didn't, and you kind of let the chips fall where they may, and it was kind of a lottery. But I had no idea that there was actually a process behind it, which is part of the reason why I am so passionate about our recruiting efforts for our own club and for helping young women all across the country, really, that I've worked with to get recruited, because I never had that help. I didn't have anyone who knew what they were doing to help me. I mean, I think I sent out a few letters. I don't even think email was really a thing. I think you actually sent handwritten letters to a few schools, but I really didn't know anything about it. So I kind of got really lucky. I happened to get seen by some schools, and for me, I didn't really know what I wanted to study or where I wanted to go to school. So I was really open to opportunities, and yeah, I really didn't know anything. I really didn't know what I was doing. I got very lucky.
Hey, sometimes luck is just as much a part of the equation as anything else. All right. Talk to me then before we get to your collegiate career, because I want to take a deep dive into that. But first, I want to pick through a few things that you had talked about growing up in sports and some of the lessons that you learned or some of the attributes that you took away. One of those was being well-rounded. And you talked about the importance of that, how your parents installed that in you in an early age. Can you dive into that a little bit deeper as to what that actually means to you, and maybe how you relay that message now to the girls that you impact?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's multifaceted. Like, I think when you're playing multiple sports, especially in regards to physicality, you're training different muscle groups, you're doing different functional movements, which in the long run is going to help prevent injury. You're going to be bigger, faster, stronger, because you aren't doing the same movements year round.
Sure.
So that's the first thing. I think just from a physical standpoint, like, you will be better suited at the collegiate level for the demands of your sport. Your body is just going to be in better shape for that. I think mentally, having to work with different groups of people, different sports draw different personality types. Mm-hmm. Yes, everyone is, obviously athletic and competitive in that sense, but I think it does draw, you get different personality types in your field sports than you do basketball, and different from gymnastics, and different, from horseback riding, which I did all of those things. So I think from a mental and social standpoint, dealing with different people, put value on that. I think that goes beyond collegiate athletics and into real life. I think I'm able to identify with a lot of different types of people as an adult now, because that was in my world as long as I can remember. I've had to do that. Also, when you're on a team and you're dealing with different types of people, you learn to not only interact with people like that, but you also learn how to work with people like that towards the common goal. And I think learning how to work with people from different perspectives, like that's just such an invaluable skill that I see a lot of kids lacking. They want to gravitate towards the things that they're good at or the things that their friends do. So they're only interacting with, one personality type that's very close to their own. So yeah, I think it has a lot of value. I think it also, when you try all of these different things, you're not going to be good at all of those things. And I definitely was not. We obviously as humans, I think it's human nature to gravitate towards things that you're good at. And I think it was really cool that my parents, it didn't seem cool at the time, but it's cool now, like hindsight, that my parents made me do things that I wasn't good at. It definitely gave me a different perspective. I think it helped me be a better leader on the teams and in the sports and in the situations where I was one of the better ones, because I knew what it was like to not be that person on the team. It also forced me to have, play different roles on the team. I wasn't always, the captain. I wasn't always the leading goal scorer, I wasn't even always a starter. So I think not just different sports, but different extracurricular activities as a kid, I think just is such an invaluable experience.
Yeah, and there are so many amazing points that you made there. The easiest one, I think, from a physicality standpoint, especially when you're a kid and you're still developing, and what that can do for you if you do play at the collegiate level and you've already built that base. Whereas if you specialize, you might not build up some of those muscles, and you can just learn from different game situations and different sports. And I'm sure that's something that you took away. But one of the larger takeaways for me, at least, is what you talked about in how you conduct yourself as a human being and as an adult now. And whether that's in your personal life or your professional life, you're able to have that, let's call it like a generalist type of background and attitude towards things, because that's how you were growing up in athletics. And generalist, I've seen a few different podcasts, and I think it's becoming the way of the world. Like, you're not seeing as many specialized, like super specialized positions anymore in corporate America. And just being able to have different skill sets is super important. It's different than multitasking, where you're distracting yourself and taking different things away from the time that you're committing to something. Being a generalist and just being good and being good can vary, right? Like, you don't have to be an expert at everything. Like you said, you're not, so that you're going to find that there's things that you're not good at, but it doesn't mean that you can't still make an impact. So I love that there was so much to take away. And the other aspect, and you started to touch on this a little bit, so I'll allow you to expand on it, is following through on commitments. And Angela Duckworth talks a lot about this. This can be attributed to grit, but one of the things that you had talked about and that she talks about is that just because you quit something doesn't mean that you're necessarily not following through on a commitment. It's just understanding like where that line is, right? Like how far to push it before it's insanity and you're just doing the same thing over and over and not getting the results that you want. So can you talk to us a little bit about how you were able to develop that muscle and understand following through your commitments, but not putting yourself in a position that isn't going to be good for you in the long run?
Right. No, I absolutely agree with that. I think it's super important to know where that line is. And I think how you establish that line for yourself is through trial and error. Mm-hmm. My parents never forced me to sign up for something or play a sport that I didn't show any interest in. I think they were just trying to teach me like thinking ahead instead of, okay, today, right now, I want to play soccer. And okay, well, that's cool. We'll sign you up. In 3 weeks, are you still going to want to be playing soccer? Or are you going to wish that you had done something different? And like, it forced me to, remove the sports component. It forced me to realize like, hey, this is something I want. What's my motivation for wanting to do this? Mm-hmm. Am I willing to commit the amount of time that is being asked for this activity or whatever it may be? And is that something I'm willing to do? And really think about everything that's incorporated in the commitment beyond time, the mental aspect. Okay, well, all my friends are playing soccer and that's, my gut instinct is to go play soccer because that's what all my friends are doing. But hey, Katie, you're not really good at soccer and you're also, taking two AP classes right now. You don't really have a ton of extra time. Is that really where our energy is best spent? So I think my parents, not forcing me to follow through on commitment, but like showing me the value and kind of pushing me to do that helped me, one, develop time management skills very early on in my life, but two, also made me take a step back and see the big picture of a lot of situations very early on in life, which I think are two skills that I think both my mother and father would say that I do very well now. And I genuinely attribute it to them placing emphasis on, hey, you can make these decisions, but like, we're going to hold you to them.
Yeah. And think about how much of an advantage you have by taking, what's it take? Like an extra 5-10 minutes to seriously think about a decision that you're going to make, and think about it on the front end and all the pain and all the wasted time that you save yourself on the back end.
Right.
If you decide against it for whatever reason, because it's just like a heat of the moment, your friends are doing it, you're being pressured, whatever it is. And it's just, it is a skill. You're totally right. And it would be such a better world, I feel like, if more of us could just take that step back for 5 minutes and say, okay, what am I really doing? What am I getting myself into?
Right.
All right. So let's talk about your collegiate career. So you start at Long Island University, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then I read that you transferred to the University of Mary Washington from there. And that was after a somewhat, what most people would call a successful rookie freshman season. Is that accurate?
So I transferred after my sophomore year, but yes, I did have both of those seasons at LIU were very successful.
So talk to me then. I'm always curious, just in general, when somebody transfers or somebody goes through, let's call it a moment of adversity, there's probably a number of different reasons as to why you made that decision. They may not be all lacrosse related, but can you give us a little insight into what that moment was like where you decided to leave?
Yeah. So after 2 years at LIU, which were amazing, I learned a ton. It was a really cool experience. I did get to come in. I started and played every game freshman and sophomore year, which when I was considering opportunities, I didn't want to sit the bench. I opted to go lower level than a lot of the schools I was recruited to, just for the fact that I wanted to play all 4 years. I only got 4 years of eligibility. I wanted to play all four. So that was one reason why I chose to go to LIU, because I was going to have that opportunity. I decided to transfer. We had a coaching change, and there had been some turnover in our coaching since I had been there. And that was really hard. Just that inconsistency. I also had, I grew up in Virginia. So going to school in New York, my dad and my mom and my dad, but my dad really throughout high school, I played 3 varsity sports. He was at all but a handful of games, home or away, for all of those sports. And one of my, ties to my father that I absolutely love and we still talk about now that I'm a coach is, sports. And after games, he'll call me. Even now, the teams I coach, he'll watch the games online and, we'll talk after the games about the game. And that is just something, that's just a bond that I have with my dad. And when I went far away to school, I remember my first game we played at Albany, and it was so cold and so miserable, and I played horribly. In my mind, I played horribly, but I remember looking to the sideline, and I knew that he wasn't there, but I remember still feeling disappointed that he wasn't there to talk to after the game. And that was really hard for me. And I really struggled with that over those 2 years. This was a road recruiting all of the sports throughout my childhood and high school, all of the accolades, the recruiting, that whole thing. My dad had been there right by my side to get to collegiate sports. And I was there, I had made it, and I wanted him to be a part of it. So that was another, I think those two things were probably the two main reasons that I decided to transfer and be closer to home.
Let's talk about the coaching change. totally understandable. I mean, you get a coach that recruits you that is probably one of, if not the biggest primary reason why you end up choosing a program and choosing a school more than anything else. And when that coach is out the door for whatever reason, it makes you start to think, do I belong here anymore? I think that's totally natural inclination to have. So how did you end up deciding, based on everything that had happened, that the University of Mary Washington was, just in terms of the lacrosse fit, how did you determine that that was a place where you could be successful and also be happy with your decision?
Yeah, that's a great question. So they had recruited me as well out of high school. Mary Washington's just in Northern Virginia. It's not far. I loved the campus. Like everything about UMW was really great. It's D3, but it's top 20 D3. If you follow women's college lacrosse, you've definitely heard of them and seen them play. It was, phenomenal, like outstanding program. A little bit smaller of a school. It honestly came down to LIU or Mary Washington. So I had already known a lot about UMW when I was looking to transfer. And I think in the back of my mind, I always knew that I wanted to go there, but I really wanted to, I think I wanted to take the D1 offer. And like you said, a big part of my reason in choosing LIU over Mary Washington from the beginning was coaching. Kim Hillier, she is the associate head coach at Stony Brook now, was the coach. She was the assistant at the time at LIU, and she had recruited me there. And, she was All-American at Hofstra. Her coaching and playing resume was outstanding. And I really wanted to play for her. So I opted for LIU. And then she actually left to go to Stony Brook. And that's when I started to consider other options. I had gotten really attached to her. I had learned a ton from her. And I just felt like it was time for a change. And that coupled with, wanting to be a little bit closer to home, I just saw it as the stars kind of aligning. And like I said, I had visited Mary Washington. I had some former teammates who were also there, and I had visited. So I knew that if I was going to leave LIU, I knew that that's where I wanted to go.
Yeah, certainly would make your decision a little bit easier having had done that homework on the front end, like we talked about earlier. So you are in a unique position where you got to play at different divisions, as you mentioned, but two pretty prestigious lacrosse programs. From a cultural perspective, did you notice anything that was different between the two, or because they're both very successful in their own rights, was there a lot of commonalities that you noticed?
That's a really hard question because I think each program is just so unique in its culture. The culture was definitely different, neither better or worse. Just, I think when you just get a different group of people, there's always going to be a different dynamic.
Sure.
Also, coming in as a transfer, we talked about knowing your role and the ability of finding that within a team. I think that that's where that was really put to the test. It's not easy to transfer as an athlete because you come into a class that has history, that has a dynamic, and you kind of throw a wrench in that. And it requires other people to change and adjust as well. I think at the Division I level, a lot of us were there on scholarship. So a lot of us, not that we worked harder, but we felt more obligated to do things because there was that scholarship component. I think at Mary Washington, because you don't have outright athletic money at the D3 level, a lot of those girls were there because that's where they wanted to be. And everything we did outside of what was required of us, just being on the team, were because we wanted to be better. That you kind of take out that obligation component. And I know obligation sometimes has some negative connotation, but there was less required of us at Mary Washington. We did just as much, but it was out of wanting to be a top program in the country, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely makes a lot of sense. Now, the final component that I want to talk about, just your whole transferring situation. So you talked about just the disappointment that you felt and maybe just the anxiety that built up first time truly being away from home. And again, I think that's something that's pretty natural to a lot of us, myself included. It was really hard when I left home for the first time for Penn State. That was a huge adjustment, but I think it's one of those aspects in life that, at least for me personally, has helped me further on down the road in life. So when my wife and I relocated from Syracuse to Charlotte, the move was much easier for me because I had done it before. I had relocated. I had been away from family, whereas for her, that was her first time. And for you, you obviously experienced that for the first time in college, and then you come back a little bit closer to home. But from there, you move around quite a bit from West Coast to East Coast, and now you're in New York. So do you think that that experience alone was able to help prepare you for some of the moves that you had in the future coming?
Oh, absolutely. Coming to New York for college was such a unique experience because I was at the Brooklyn campus. So I was literally living in the city as a college student, which is an invaluable experience. I was far away from home and I was in a huge city. I definitely think that I have seen the effects of that in my adult life with, I have moved around quite a bit. Anytime you do something for the first time, there's a lot of anxiety like you were talking about. But I think once you kind of break through that threshold, it gets easier. So I don't think I would have ever had the courage to move to California and live in San Diego had I not had the college experience that I did. And I'm so thankful for that because through my moves as an adult, I've just met some amazing people, and I definitely would not be doing what I'm doing now. So grateful for that.
Hey everyone, Christine here to talk about a sponsor of this show, my own business, Sweat with Stods. Head over to sweatwithstods.com to get the workout that suits your needs, whether you work out at home, in the gym, or you're brand new to fitness. There's something for everyone. Podcast listeners also get a special discount with code DYNAMIC at checkout, so be sure to head on over there after this. Thanks, and back to the show.
So catch us up. You finish out your collegiate career. Why did you decide to move? Did you go to San Diego as soon as you graduated?
I did not. I actually spent about almost a year in Charlotte. My now husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, was working and living in Charlotte. So I moved down to Charlotte and we lived there for about a year and then moved. We decided that we wanted to see what West Coast life was like and figured no better time than now when we were young and pretty uninhibited. So we moved out to San Diego and lived in San Diego for almost 3 years. And then we're both from the East Coast, and it just got kind of hard to be away from family. And we felt like we had kind of experienced everything that we had wanted to experience. So we moved back to Wilmington, North Carolina. And then we honestly thought that that's where we were going to be. But my husband got a job in Manhattan kind of unexpectedly. So we moved up here a few months ago.
So when you get out to San Diego, that's the time where you meet a fellow friend of ours, Andrea Hervé, and you end up coaching under her. She's the head coach at a high school out there, correct?
She was at UC San Diego. So
okay.
College club program. But on the West Coast, honestly, most of those club lacrosse programs run like a smaller D3, I'd say. Just because there aren't a lot of other college options out there. So yeah, she was the head coach. We also played post-collegiate together, which was super fun, and had a bunch of mutual friends. I interviewed for her assistant position. We hit it off right away. There was just mutual respect there. And when you play a collegiate sport and then you go into like corporate America or your big kid job, whatever it may be, and you kind of quit sports cold turkey. It's really hard. Like I didn't realize how tough that was going to be for me. So the coaching position that she had was part-time, super flexible. And I figured, let's do this. Like I need this back in my life, at least a little bit. Ended up loving it and was like, this is what I want to do. So Andrea and I sat down and we were actually just having a casual conversation about, the club world and kind of what that landscape looks like and all the issues with it. And, our big thing was, there were two huge clubs, youth clubs that run K through 12 in San Diego at the time. And they would hold these huge tryouts, and, they'd have 100 plus kids come out, and they'd take the top 25. And it's like, I was like, okay, well, what happens to kid number 26 or 32? Like, they aren't bad.
Right.
Like, do they just not get to play, or do they just not get to go to tournaments? Like, the cool thing about our sport is that there is a college, like, if you want to play in college, like, there is a place for you. It's just a matter of finding that right opportunity, which is really, really unique, I think, to lacrosse. And so that's kind of how Team Lacrosse Academy was born. Was we took all of those kids who got cut from these huge mega clubs and made our own. And a lot of those kids so just a point of pride, and obviously won't use any specific names, but our first season running our club, we had an entire team of kids who got cut from one club. We played that one club at a tournament and beat them. Wow. So that experience just proved to me that, one, coaching was what I wanted to do, and two, I wanted to make a difference. Kid 26 should have just as many opportunities to play as kid number 1.
Yeah, that's an awesome story.
That all happened in San Diego, to answer your question.
Yes, and a great story. Really awesome that you were able, just the drive those kids must have had to prove that they belong on that field with that team that they got cut from. That's like what you see in the movies, right?
Yes, it was honestly, like, I have goosebumps now talking about it. It was honestly top 3 coaching moments of my life. And I think from there, that's how Andrew and I kind of, you get that moment of validation where, hey, we've been working so hard. That's when it all was like, okay, it's worth it. Like, it's worth it to see the look on those kids' faces.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we dive into your expertise as it relates to the academy, I want to focus on the coaching aspect a little bit more and just find out from your perspective, what other joys, obviously that was, like you said, a top 3 moment, but what other joys do you get out of coaching? Why is it something that you continue to do?
Oh, gosh. I love coaching because I love you are a family when you are on a team. And I remember so vividly from my own experience, going through there's just so much growth that happens in those 4 years, mentally, socially, emotionally, whatever it may be, to be a part of a family and to help young women, walk through that chapter of their life. Because it's hard. It's really hard. It's very demanding. It's harder than anything you've done prior to that. And helping to show the value of what they're learning outside of the field as it pertains to my own life. I speak from experience a lot of the time when coaching. But honestly, for me is, walking through this chapter of their life that was just so important to me and that forever holds a special place in my heart is definitely one of my top joys. I think the other one is I love a good underdog story. I know a lot of people do, and I feel like when you talk to people who work in sports, everybody loves a good underdog. But I love working with the kid who, everybody likes as the coach, the kid who comes out and works hard and is super talented and is the clutch player that, scores the game-winning touchdown or whatever it may be. Like, that kid's awesome, and those kids definitely have a role on the team and do a lot of great things. But I love working with the kids who need a little bit of extra attention, the diamonds in the rough, the underdogs. For me, it's like my challenge, my job as the coach is to help every kid, regardless of what they're struggling with, like get it and accomplish whatever goals that they have. So on our team, all the teams that I coach, I'm really big on having our kids not just set very specific and quantifiable team goals, but also doing that for themselves individually as well, because, it all relates. Like, the team can't be better if you as an individual aren't getting better. And I think making it quantifiable, like, let's make it a trackable goal so that they can see in black and white the results of their efforts or not. If you aren't putting in the time, like, you're going to see how you aren't improving relative to your teammates. So for me, I think what I love most about what I do is helping them set goals, giving them the tools and the resources and the help that they need to put in the work, having them do that, and to see, again, in black and white, something that's trackable, definitively better, showing their progress that way. That for me is, and when they see the efforts, the fruits of their labor, like, it's such a great moment when they look and they're like, wow, coach, like, I can do that skill now that I couldn't do before. And they do it in a game and it works. And that excitement of just the road well traveled and that crossing that finish line for whatever it may be, that for me brings me the most joy.
It's so great to hear that it does, because much like with other professions, I think it can be extremely easy to get burnt out or to not see those moments as truly special, those learning moments when the light switches for the kids and when they're developing in their own right. It's not always just about you. And I think that's a really special attribute that you're able to recognize that, and that in turn makes you happy with the job that you do. So
yeah,
I love that. And I want to talk a little bit strategically and practically about coaching before we leave this topic. We have a lot of listeners that either are in coaching or aspire to be coaches in athletics. And I'd love for you to be able to tell, and it's okay if it's specific to women's lacrosse, but maybe you can generalize it. I'd love for you to be able to tell us, how do coaches get started? Like, what are some practical steps you can take to get involved in coaching? And then piggyback that with, as an assistant, what is your specific roles and responsibilities?
Yeah, so I think to get involved, you got to just put yourself out there. I think if you're just starting out, it's really important to test out a lot of different age groups. I have had personal friends who they went straight into college coaching and realized it wasn't for them. And then, years later, they somehow find their way back to like club coaching or youth coaching, and they love it. And then vice versa. I've had people who were like, I need to take a break from this for a while. Like, I played in college. I it's too demanding. Like, I need something easier. And, they start out in youth and they're like, wow, like, I love this. Like, this is actually my calling. And they work their way back up to college. So I think it's just trying it out, like, get involved in a club program or a rec program and dabble in different age groups. I think that's definitely what I did to start. I started with college club and then started a youth club. And I've worked with kids that are 3 years old up to 22 years old and everything in between, before realizing that I love my club girls and I will probably run that forever. But college, that for me, like, as a coach, like, that's where I really like to be. So I think just getting started out, like, that's the best way to do it. Is just try different age groups and see what you like and see how it all goes. And so as an assistant, I am, and different programs are run different ways, but at Montclair State, we have not a hierarchy, but we definitely have a chain of command. We have the team, then we have captains, then there's me, and then there's our associate head coach and our head coach. From a coaching standpoint, when we're actually out on the field running practice or in games, coaches are a unified front. We all act as, they joke and call us the Holy Trinity. Like, we are Father, Son, Holy Ghost. We are, we are we are three parts, but one thing. As an assistant, my roles and responsibilities, the first and most important is to kind of be the first touch point in the coaching staff for players and captains. So if there is, anything going on in the team, I am like the therapist of the team. The girls come to me first, for sure, when they're struggling with class or there's a social situation or, anything in their day-to-day life that could or potentially will affect their performance on the field. I'm kind of the first line of communication that they come to my office first. My other roles and responsibility are I handle a lot of the recruiting. So I vet a lot of the girls that reach out to us. I go to a lot of tournaments and watch a lot of kids play. And I've kind of put together our recruiting board and then brief our head coaches on what I believe our top kids to be. I take just a lot of the vetting of potential candidates or potential recruits. I do a lot of that and then kind of put together, my top 20 list for her. And then she goes through and decides what her top options are. And we go from there. I also, and again, every coaching staff is different, but I am our offensive coordinator. So basically anything from the midfield up, and any time that we have possession of the ball, I do the play calling, the starting lineup on that side of the field. I handle anything offensively based. So I work with our midfielders and our attackers pretty extensively. I also do a lot of individual or small group sessions before or after practice, or on the girls' own time to work on very specific nitpicky skills and technique and mechanical type movements, to make sure that they're improving in the very specific individualistic ways like we talked about earlier. Those are sort of my major roles and responsibilities. My head coach, Nicole Parsluzzi, is amazing. She gives me a lot of autonomy, but also has been an amazing mentor over team management. So she was a goalie at Rutgers when she played. So she is very goalie specific, but works a lot with our defense. The head coach, oversees budgets and scheduling and travel, a lot of that. She kind of tells me what she wants to do, and I do a lot of the logistical work for her, but she handles a lot of the overarching big picture type things, and then kind of delegates to myself and our associate head coach. And again, every program's a little bit different, but that's sort of the breakdown of ours.
Sure. So in your role, again, you're just showcasing that you are more of a generalist than you are just a super specialist assistant that only focuses on one aspect of the lacrosse program.
I try to just help her with whatever she needs.
Yeah. Yes. Jack of all trades, and obviously suits you and your personality, I think, really well, along with your skill set, obviously. So let's talk about, because I know this is a passion of yours. It's something that you do in college with the lacrosse program, but also with the academy. Let's talk about the recruiting piece in a little bit more depth and detail. So obviously, and I was totally the same way when I was coming up through high school and into college. I thought it was go to the showcases, people would identify you, and then you would go play at your dream school. Everything would be all nice and rosy. And obviously it just not work that way. These days, there are so many more tools. Like I was in high school almost 12 years ago now. So Facebook was just becoming a thing. There wasn't social media. There were videos like recruiting videos, but definitely not as popular as they were these days, especially in baseball. That was my sport. But talk to us about, I guess, where do we want to start this recruiting conversation? Because I know it's pretty in-depth and pretty big of a topic. So where do we want to start with how do we best prepare for the recruiting process?
That's a really great question. And I think it's different for different kids. I always tell families, make a list of what's important to you with what you want out of your college experience, whether that be I want to go to a big school, small school. I want to go close to home, far away. I want to major in nursing or criminal justice, whatever it is you think you might want to do. Make a list of all the things, the must-haves, right? You don't go on a trip and not make a list of what you need to pack. You don't just throw random things into a suitcase. So I think it's important to identify what your needs are out of a school. And then from that, we want to research schools that have, I would say, at least 50 to 75% of that list. Check off the boxes for at least 50 to 75% of what we think we want. And again, that list is not a hard list. It's a working list. It's going to change. Kids are going to change from year to year, and they're allowed to do that. That's totally fine, but it's at least a starting point. From that, we want to make a list. And again, I'm really big on things that we can actually track, quantifiable things. So making a spreadsheet of all the schools that have those things, breaking them up, divisions. And then we want to email those coaches in an introduction. Hey, this is who I am. This is who I play for. I'm really interested in your program. Here's my position. Here's some of my accolades. I play on this club team. Here's our club schedule. There's a bunch of different ways to kind of format that initial touch point of communication, but putting ourselves out there, casting a big net. And then from there, everyone's experience is pretty individualized depending on skill set or where they're honestly, and with our sport, like where you're located. It's not fair, but it's just the simple truth. A kid located in New York is going to have an easier time getting recruited than a kid in Alabama. It's the visibility that the New York kid's going to have is just way more. The amount of schools recruiting out of that area is just way more. It's changing now as the growth of lacrosse across the country continues, but that's depending on where you're geographically located really determines your visibility, which I know you talked about a highlight tape. I always encourage kids. That's become a necessity of recruiting at this point. As a college coach, when I get an email, a kid who I can't see if it's worth my time to come watch you play, you're not a high priority. And you could be the best player in the country, but if I can't tell that, there's so many other kids emailing us that send us highlight tapes that I can see play before I have to, evaluate them at a tournament. They just have such an advantage. And especially if you're in one of those geographical areas that doesn't have high visibility, like it's necessary. Like that's absolutely a must. And then from there, just keeping coaches updated with what tournaments you're playing at in your schedule so that they can evaluate you. We, as a staff, go to different tournaments. There's tons of tournaments throughout the summer and the fall. We evaluate the same kids at different tournaments and then compare notes. And so we're watching kids play 3, 4, 5 times, depending on the tournaments that they're going to. And then, from there, like I said, we make that top 20 list for each position and then, it also depends on what we need in each class year. You could be the best attacker for the 2021 class, but if we're not recruiting 2021s, or we're not recruiting attackers for the 2021 class, you're not a good fit for us. So there's a lot of factors that go into it, which is why I encourage kids to make that initial list of, hey, what's important to you? And let's reach out to schools that have those things and then see, cast the big net and then see what comes back. That's where you want to start. And then from there, like I said, it's just very individualized depending on a player's talent, where they're located, and what they want out of the experience.
The key points that I'm taking away from that then are, and tell me if this is fair or not, but the recruiting process as a high school student athlete is as much about being proactive as it is about anything else.
Oh, for sure. And organized.
Proactive and organized. I love that. And then to the point of the highlight videos, and I think I've heard Andrea talk about this before, and I've had a Division I college football player on here before who ended up playing in the pros as well. When you're talking about a highlight video, highlight tape, whatever you call it, you don't necessarily need the $300 or the $1,000 production, right? You just need something that is good enough for you to be able to see the aspects that you're looking for.
Oh, yeah. I mean, honestly, one of our best recruits for the 2020 class, her film was, I think, from her dad's iPhone. You don't need to I mean, we're going to come watch you play. It's very rare for us to recruit someone that we don't see in person. The highlight video just needs to hook us. It's like your dating profile. I want something witty, clever, showcase who you are, make me want to come see you. That's what that highlight video is needed for. So it doesn't need to be, I mean, obviously the videos that have the spot shadows and the music and are professionally done with great video, obviously those are great, but they're definitely not necessary.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you have the most expensive video highlights. If you don't have the skills, nobody's going to
Exactly.
come watch you play. And then the last highlight before we get to my final two questions for you is, and I just want to say I love this so much because the recruiting process, I feel like, is just as much as it is an interview process in the professional world, where, and you said it multiple times, make a list of what's important to you, because it should be as imperative and as important for you to figure out what it is that you want as it is for the other side to figure out what they want. If you're relying
Absolutely.
if you're relying on the other side to make all the decisions for you, that first off doesn't really, I think, speak very highly of who you are as an individual, but you're probably going to end up in a spot that maybe isn't a great fit for you because you're not understanding what it is that you want. So I just want to say how much I love that particular piece of advice. And that is something I always encourage people to do as well. And I really hope people who are listening to that take that to heart.
Oh, for sure. And I think another thing too is asking. I see a lot of kids who, they talk on the phone to a coach, or they go for their official visit and sit down with a coach. And, the coach has a bunch of questions for them, and they prep for that side of it. But a lot of kids forget that, like, when I sit down with a potential recruit, I expect you to, like, you should absolutely have questions for me,
Sure.
just like you would in an interview.
Right.
Like, when I have a kid, I'm like, hey, like, do you have any questions for me? And they go, no, I don't think so. I'm like, I feel like you haven't done your research then. That makes me feel like you might not know exactly what it is that you're looking for. If you don't have any questions to ask. So highly, highly, highly encourage. It's just as much an interview for the program and the coach as it is for you. It needs to be a good fit both ways for everybody for it to be a good fit and for you to perform the way that you're going to be expected to perform once you do get into that program.
100% agree. And that will transition us to my final two questions. So a lot of listeners on here, and I will put myself into this group as well. We are solo entrepreneurs and we don't have a business partner. We do what we do on our own. We answer to ourselves, and it's pretty easy that way. You are in this with Team Lacrosse Academy with Andrea, and having to work closely with somebody like that. I think it's different in a sense when, and tell me if I'm wrong, but being an assistant for a head coach is probably very similar to being an employee and talking to the CEO. Whereas when you're both have a pretty significant stake in something and you're both have a vision for what you're trying to do, you're kind of on equal ground. The relationship and the dynamic is a little bit different. So I'd love for you to be able to tell us what that working relationship is like and how you and Andrea have been able to be so successful, keep your friendship as strong as you have. I know Andrea talked about how much fun she had at your wedding. So not just from a business sense, but obviously from a personal sense, obviously you still can stand to be around each other, which is awesome.
Yes, she's my best friend. I think one thing that Andrea and I have that is very unique to our friendship and business relationship is our perspectives are very different usually, but I pick her brain about things all the time and she picks mine because we feel more prepared. We feel stronger when we do develop something that both of us have been working on because we feel like we've come at it from all angles and we're able to relate to so many different people because there are our two personality types. I also feel like we're very yin and yang in our business. Like the things that I am not good at, she is good at. And the things that she might not necessarily be that good at, like she knows that I've got her back. So I think, they tell you not to go into business with your friends. But her, like, I couldn't imagine a better person to work with. Like she is the yin to my yang, honestly. And I think obviously we have difference of opinions sometimes, but there's always that level of respect that we have for the other person. and the other person's opinion that I think has helped us build a strong and successful business.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how cordial you were towards her. Now I can tell her she can listen to this podcast and not get upset about it.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, so Katie, before we dive into this final question, I will put into the show notes all the information as far as like how to figure out more about the academy. But just in terms of if somebody wants to reach out to you, they have a question, they want to learn more about lacrosse or whatever it is from today's conversation, is there a way that you prefer to touch base with people via online social media?
So if you go to our website, www.teamlax or teamlaxacademy.com, you can reach any of our coaching staff with any questions. I primarily head up our recruiting. So if it's about recruiting, you can definitely email me off of that website, and I'm happy to help anyone. But that's probably the best way to get a hold of us.
All right. So the show is called Dynamic Leaders, and obviously you are on this show today. You showcase a lot of leadership qualities in your professional life, in your lacrosse career. But I do like to give my guests an opportunity to shout out somebody in their life that has helped shape them and who stands out maybe as somebody that has strong leadership qualities. Do you have somebody that you want to give a shout out to today?
I have two. Is that okay?
Yes.
So Andrew Hervé, obviously my business partner, I would not be where I am at without her in both my professional life and my personal life. She has been an amazing friend, an amazing business partner, the maid of honor at my wedding. She has helped me realize and has given me the courage to go after this dream, which I don't think I would have had if I had not met her. And then the other person that I wanted to shout out would be Kim Hillier. She was the assistant at LAU who recruited me. She is now the associate head coach at Stony Brook, who is a top 5 Division I program. She definitely gave me the drive and challenged my mental toughness over the years, but she's been an amazing coach and an amazing colleague, and I think is someone that I really look up to in this industry, who not only knows her stuff, but who truly cares about her athletes on a personal level as well. And I think you see that in the success of that program.
Awesome shout outs and a great way to end. We just got about an hour in here today, and I know we probably could have talked a lot longer, but Katie, this has been so great, and I certainly appreciate you taking the time that you did today. Wish you all the best in the future, but thank you again so much for taking some time to hop on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was great.
Thank you again to Katie for hopping on the podcast. You can learn more about Team Lacrosse Academy and follow along with her on social media by checking out the show notes. Thank you to my sponsor, Sweat with Stods. Go to www.sweatwithstods.com. Really, do it today. I know I say it all the time, but do it right now. Get yourself in a position to improve your fitness goals, your nutrition goals, any healthy habit lifestyle changes that you want to make. It's not too late. We're just getting started here in 2020. Contact her today to see how she can help you. If you liked this show, please feel free to share it with your friends and family on social media. And if you have a minute, give us a 5-star rating and review. It helps us find other dynamic leaders, and it helps dynamic leaders find us. The podcast rolls on here in 2020. This is the last guest episode for the month of January. We have a solo pod episode lined up for you, so please stay tuned for that. And until next time, take it easy.